The moment my stepmother smiled and said, "The house is finally ours," I knew something was terribly wrong. The judge hadn't even spoken yet. Why were they so confident, unless the truth I'd been hiding was about to destroy them instead? I sat perfectly still at the defendant's table, my hands folded, my face calm enough to pass for indifference. Inside, my pulse was screaming. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and cold air conditioning, a place where lives were taken apart with words and paperwork. Across from me, Linda Harper adjusted the pearl necklace at her throat like a trophy already won. Beside her sat my stepbrother, Jason Harper, leaning back with smug ease, his ankle resting on his knee as if this were a casual lunch meeting, not a hearing meant to strip me of my home. They thought I was cornered. Linda dabbed her eyes with a tissue, the performance flawless. Anyone watching would see a grieving widow desperate to protect the family estate. That's what her lawyer had called it moments earlier. Family estate. As if the house hadn't been mine long before Linda ever learned my father's favorite wine. The judge cleared her throat, flipping through the case file. I noticed how Linda's lips curved upward just slightly. She'd rehearsed this moment. They both had. Jason leaned toward me as the bailiff stepped away. His voice was low, confident, almost amused. "You should have signed when we asked nicely, Emma," he whispered. "Now it's going to hurt." I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the judge, on the thin stack of papers that supposedly proved I was mentally unfit to manage my own property. Unfit. That word had followed me for years. The hearing began with Linda's attorney painting me into something fragile and unreliable. He spoke slowly, gently, as if addressing a child. "Ms. Emma Collins has a documented history of emotional instability following her father's passing," he said. During a vulnerable period, she agreed, verbally and in writing, that the family home would revert to Mrs. Harper for proper management. Jason nodded along, grieving son turned responsible heir. Linda sniffed at exactly the right moments. I wondered if anyone else in the room could hear the echo of my father's voice in my head. "Emma, trust facts, not feelings." The judge looked up. "Ms. Collins, is it true you signed this agreement?" I stood. My heels felt suddenly too loud against the floor. "I signed a document," I said evenly. "But not the one they're presenting." Jason's smile twitched. Linda's lawyer sighed sympathetically. "Your Honor, this denial is consistent with Ms. Collins's pattern. She frequently revises reality when faced with stress." The words landed hard, meant to bruise. I felt the familiar pressure behind my eyes, the old instinct to shrink, to apologize for existing too loudly. It would have been easier. That was what they expected. But 8 years ago, I'd learned something important. Silence is only weakness when you don't know the truth. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Collins, your fathers will left the house to you outright. Why would you later surrender it?" I met her gaze. "I wouldn't." Linda's hand tightened on her purse. Her lawyer interjected quickly. "Your Honor, we also submit medical testimony suggesting Ms. Collins struggles with decision-making under emotional distress." I watched Jason's confidence return, blooming like rot. Then the judge frowned, not at me, but at the document itself. She adjusted her glasses, scanning a section more carefully. "This address," she said slowly. "This is not your primary residence, Ms. Collins. Correct?" "No," I replied. "It's one of them." A subtle shift rippled through the room. Jason straightened. Linda's tissue froze midair. "One of them?" the judge repeated. "Yes, Your Honor." My attorney, Michael Reed, rose calmly. He didn't rush. He didn't smile. He simply opened his briefcase and placed a thick folder on the table. "With the court's permission," he said, "we'd like to clarify Ms. Collins's assets." Linda's lawyer objected instantly. "Relevance?" The judge raised a hand. "Overruled." "I'm listening." Michael opened the folder. The sound of paper turning felt louder than it should have. 8 years ago, he began, Miss Collins purchased a small duplex on the east side of the city. She was 24. She worked 2 jobs and attended night classes in finance. My stepmother stared at him, unblinking. The rental income from that property funded the down payment on her second acquisition. Then the third. Jason shook his head once, sharply, as if trying to dislodge a thought he didn't like. The property at issue today, Michael continued, is the 7th in her portfolio. The room went quiet in a way that felt physical, like pressure on my chest. Linda's pearls slipped slightly as her shoulders sagged. Jason laughed, too loudly. That's impossible. Michael didn't look at him. The 8th property was purchased 2 years ago. A mixed-use redevelopment project. The judge's eyebrows lifted. Are you referring to the Blackwell building? Yes, Your Honor. That name changed everything. I saw recognition flicker across faces in the gallery. The Blackwell building wasn't just profitable, it was famous. A failed project revived by an anonymous investor. Jason's mouth opened. Closed. Linda's face drained of color. I had never told them. Not once. They never asked. They'd been too busy assuming. The judge turned to Linda's counsel. You described Ms. Collins as reckless. Michael spoke before the man could respond. If I may add, Your Honor, the Blackwell building now funds 3 additional properties. I finally looked at Jason. He was staring at me like I was someone else entirely. And for the first time since this began, I knew. They hadn't come to take my house. They'd walked straight into something much bigger. The silence after Michael's last sentence stretched longer than anyone expected. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came from respect, it was confusion, disbelief, the sound of assumptions collapsing. The judge leaned back in her chair, studying me now instead of the papers. Not with suspicion. With interest. Ms. Collins, she said carefully, why was none of this disclosed earlier? I kept my voice steady. Because it wasn't relevant until they claimed I was incapable of managing my affairs. Jason let out a sharp breath, halfway between a scoff and panic. Linda's fingers curled into the leather of her purse like she might tear it open with her nails. Her attorney stood again, visibly rattled. Your Honor, even if Ms. Collins owns other properties, that does not negate the agreement she signed while under emotional duress. Michael stepped forward smoothly. Which agreement, exactly? The man hesitated. Michael placed a single page on the podium. We obtained the original document Ms. Collins signed. Jason's leg dropped from its relaxed position. He leaned forward now, alert. This is a power of attorney form, Michael continued, granting temporary authority to manage utilities and repairs on the family home while Miss Collins was traveling overseas. He turned the page. This, he said, tapping the document Linda's team submitted, is not the same document. The judge's eyes narrowed. Are you alleging forgery? Linda stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Her voice cracked, sharp and defensive. The Fragile Widow Act slipped, just for a second. Michael didn't raise his voice. We're alleging alteration. Specifically, that a page was substituted after Ms. Collins signed the original. The courtroom buzzed softly. A bailiff called for order. Jason shot to his feet. You can't prove that. I watched him unravel, the confidence draining from his posture. Michael nodded once. We can. He handed the judge a USB drive. The original form was notarized at a consulate in Lisbon, he explained. They retained digital copies of all documents processed that day. The judge turned to Linda's counsel. Did your office verify the source of your document? The man swallowed. It was provided by my client. Linda's breath came fast now. She glanced at Jason, searching his face for reassurance. He didn't give it. The judge exhaled slowly. Miss Harper, please take a seat. Reluctantly, Linda sat. But the damage was done. The room had shifted. The story they brought into court no longer fit the facts in front of them. Jason leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently. His eyes flicked toward me again, but this time there was calculation behind them. The judge addressed the court. This hearing was convened to determine property control, not to investigate criminal conduct. However, the allegations raised are serious. She paused, then looked directly at Linda. Ms. Harper, did you alter this document? Linda's lips parted. No sound came out at first. Then she laughed, short, brittle. Of course not. This is a misunderstanding. I recognized the laugh. I'd heard it when she lied about selling my father's watch. When she claimed she'd never read his emails. Michael wasn't finished. If the court allows, he said, we'd also like to address motive. Linda's lawyer objected weakly, but the judge waved him off. Michael turned toward the bench. 2 months after Mr. Collins passed, Ms. Harper attempted to secure a loan against the property. Jason froze. The loan was denied, Michael continued, because the title was not in her name. Linda's face flushed red. That was for renovations. Michael nodded. The same renovations she later billed to Ms. Collins. The judge looked down at her notes again. I felt something strange settle over me. Not triumph. Relief. Like a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Jason stood again, trying to regain control. Even if the document was altered, Emma agreed to let my mother handle things. She wasn't stable after Dad died. Everyone knew that. There it was. The word again. Stable. I rose slowly. May I speak? The judge nodded. I faced the courtroom. After my father died, I was grieving. That didn't make me incompetent. Jason scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. I asked Linda to help with the house while I was overseas negotiating a property deal, I continued. She agreed. That's all. Linda shook her head. You were confused. No, I said quietly. I was focused. The judge's gaze sharpened. Ms. Harper, did you ever inform Ms. Collins you attempted to secure a loan against the property? Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. No, she muttered. The word echoed louder than any shout. The judge set her pen down. This court cannot grant control of the property under these circumstances. Jason's shoulders slumped. But, the judge added, given the evidence of potential document alteration, I am referring this matter for further review. Linda's breath hitched. This hearing is adjourned, the judge said firmly. The gavel struck. As people began to stand, Linda grabbed Jason's arm. Fix this, she hissed. He yanked his arm free, his face pale. I gathered my papers calmly. Michael leaned in close. They underestimated you, he murmured. I glanced back once more at Linda. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the door, like someone already planning how to run. The courthouse emptied faster than I expected. One moment it was packed with murmurs and side glances, the next it was just polished floors and echoes of shoes moving away from consequences. I stepped outside into the cold afternoon air and let myself breathe for the first time in hours. Michael walked beside me in silence until we reached the steps. You did exactly what you needed to, he said. From here on, it's procedural. I nodded, but my attention drifted to the parking lot. Linda stood near a black sedan, her back rigid, phone pressed to her ear. Jason paced a few feet away, running his hands through his hair over and over, like the motion alone might undo what had happened. When Linda spotted me, her call ended instantly. Emma, she called out, forcing warmth into her voice. We need to talk. Michael glanced at me. I'll give you a moment. He stepped aside, but stayed close enough to hear if he needed to. Linda approached, pearls gone now, coat buttoned too tightly. Without the courtroom lighting and audience, she looked smaller. Older. This didn't have to turn into this, she said. Families handle things privately. I studied her face. The woman who had moved into my childhood home 2 months after my mother died. Who'd rearranged the furniture and erased my father piece by piece. You tried to take my house, I said. Jason stepped closer. You're exaggerating. I turned to him. You called me unstable in open court. He flinched. You were fragile. Grief isn't fragility, I said. It's honesty. Linda exhaled sharply. We were protecting you. I almost laughed. From what? I asked. From discovering who you really are. Jason's jaw tightened. You think you've won. But referrals and reviews don't mean convictions. Michael cleared his throat softly behind me. Linda leaned in closer, lowering her voice. If this goes any further, things will get complicated. There it was. The threat, thinly veiled. I met her gaze without blinking. They already are. For a moment, something raw flickered across her face, fear, maybe. Or calculation. Your father would be disappointed, she said suddenly. The words were meant to wound. Years ago, they would have. I stepped closer, my voice calm. My father trusted me. That's why he never put your name on anything. Linda recoiled as if struck. Jason laughed bitterly. You think you're untouchable now because you have money? No, I said. Because I have proof. I turned and walked away before either of them could respond. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. I was in my office, sunlight cutting across blueprints spread over the table. A new project. Affordable housing this time. Something my father would have admired. The envelope bore the seal of the district attorney's office. Michael had warned me it was coming. I opened it slowly. Formal language. Neutral tone. But the message was clear. An investigation had been opened into possible document fraud and attempted financial coercion. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt tired. Power struggles don't end when the gavel falls. They change shape. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to fix this. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Michael. Minutes later, my assistant knocked lightly. Miss Collins? There's a woman downstairs asking for you. Did she give a name? She hesitated. Linda Harper. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Send her up, I said. Linda entered my office like someone stepping onto unfamiliar ground. She took in the glass walls, the city view, the framed architectural renderings. Each detail chipped away at the image she'd clung to of me. She didn't sit. I made a mistake, she said. No apology. Just strategy. Jason wasn't with her this time. The investigation will ruin us, she continued. We can settle this. Settle how? I asked. She slid a folder onto my desk. We walk away. Cleanly. You withdraw cooperation. I opened the folder. Inside was a proposed agreement, and an offer. A large one. I closed it gently. You still don't understand. Linda's eyes hardened. Everyone has a price. I stood. I don't. She stared at me, searching for weakness. She didn't find it. You think you're better than us, she said quietly. No, I replied. I think I'm done protecting you. Her shoulders sagged, just slightly. If this goes to trial, she said, Jason could lose everything. I felt the weight of that. Not guilt, clarity. He made his choices, I said. So did you. Linda turned toward the door, then stopped. You really never told us, she said. About any of it. No, I said. You never asked. She left without another word. That evening, I stood alone in the house they'd tried to take from me. The light through the windows looked different now. Cleaner. For years, I'd mistaken survival for silence. Now I understood something else entirely. Silence is what people count on when they plan to take what isn't theirs. And I was done being quiet. The trial began in early spring, when the city was still unsure whether it wanted to wake up. By then, the story had already changed hands. What started as a quiet property dispute had become something reporters whispered about outside the courthouse. Not my name, never my name, but the idea that someone had tried to steal from the wrong person. I sat through the proceedings without spectacle. No tears. No speeches. Just facts. Linda avoided my eyes from the witness stand. Jason didn't. He watched me constantly, like he was still trying to figure out when the ground shifted beneath him. The evidence spoke with a patience no human voice could match. Digital records from the Lisbon consulate. Metadata showing altered pages. Email chains Linda thought she'd deleted. Bank records tying the attempted loan directly to Jason. Their defense unraveled slowly, painfully, one thread at a time. When Jason finally took the stand, his confidence was gone. He answered questions too quickly, then too slowly. His story bent under its own weight. And when the prosecutor asked why he'd called me unstable, he hesitated. I thought it was true, he said. The courtroom held its breath. Based on what? The prosecutor asked. Jason swallowed. Because she didn't fight back before. That was it. Not evidence. Not concern. Expectation. Linda's verdict came first. Guilty on 2 counts. Fraud and attempted coercion. The sentence was measured, restrained, unavoidable. Jason's followed. Lesser charges. Enough to mark him permanently. I felt no rush of triumph. Just finality. Afterward, outside the courthouse, microphones appeared like birds sensing movement. I didn't stop walking. Michael shielded me gently. No statements, he said. At home that night, I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache. My phone buzzed once. A message from Jason. I never thought you were capable of this. I stared at the screen, then typed back. That was the problem. I blocked the number. Weeks later, I made one last change. I transferred the house into a trust, not for protection, but for intention. Someday it would fund scholarships, community spaces, something lasting. Something forward. On the final walkthrough before renovations began, I found an old photo tucked behind a bookshelf. My father and me, standing on the porch, sunlight in our eyes. He looked proud. I realized then that the real inheritance wasn't the house, or the portfolio, or even the victory. It was knowing when to speak. Because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly, until someone mistakes your silence for surrender. And by the time they realize the difference, it's already too late.